From the southernmost point of Dorne to the lands of always winter, what is west of Westeros and the shadows in the east. This is Casterly Talk. I'm Ken Knapsack here for the Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, and House of Dragon podcast that loves to dig deep into the themes of the show, the lessons that are there, have fun remembering, speculate of the future, and occasionally cry for Jorah Mormont and Stannis Baratheon. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. We are wrapping up our look at Season 3 of Game of Thrones. So here we are. It's 2013, June 9th, 2013, and Season 3 is coming to a close with Episode 10 of this season, the 30th overall, titled MHYSA. MHYSA. We are going to learn all about that word a little bit later on and talk about that scene, both in story and out of story, what that scene means for Game of Thrones and its legacy, good and bad. Director of this episode was David Nutter. The writers were Benioff and Weiss, cinematographer Robert McLaughlin, and editor was Oral Nori Oti. And that's same crew that was all on Season 3, Episode 9. They usually work in 2-episode kind of chunks, if memory serves, and just kind of checking the credits along the way. All right, it's me. Let's do it. Let's dig in. Let's look at this episode. What does Ken Knapsack think? Hey, that's me. Season 3, Episode 10. We're also going to look back a little bit at Season 3 overall. And next week on the show, if you're watching in sequential order, No, sequential. Next week, we're going to do a live show here on the YouTube channel side and release it as a podcast, as always, and just kind of take questions to you. Talk about House of the Dragon, talk about Season 3, Season 4, any of the seasons. Talk about the books, talk about the maps, talk about your favorite sigil. I don't know. We'll talk about it. And my favorite sigil is Stannis Baratheon's Heart Aflame, because I'm a Stannis guy. All right, let's look at the overall kind of notes and thoughts here on this episode. It was I consider this one a good and needed follow-up to Episode 9, but there's some letdown. There's going to be some letdown. Season 3, Episode 9 was it was a hard one. It was an emotional gut punch. It was also huge. It changed a lot of the plot going forward. Big ramifications for what's going on at the Red Wedding and beyond, even in that episode. So I think naturally, well, we're all going into Season 3, Episode 10, ready to close the series, season out and looking for the next season of the series. You can't help but feel let down. And because of that, I think I still, even in this watch through, I still feel this is one of my least favorite finales of the show. Again, I'm here for every episode. Some I'm going to like more than others. That's fair. That's how it works. But I don't like ranking things. But in looking back and talking about it, yeah, this episode, this finale, not one of my, bottom 8. Looking at the finales, and that's been we answered that question before on Daily Thrones. Best episode 1. Best finale, not counting the Season 8 stuff. Season 8 final episode, kind of different category there. But what is the best episode that takes you to the next season? I still think Season 6 is just, magnificent. I love a lot of Season 1 and 2. Season 1 and 2, the Season 1 finale, particularly with Jorah Mormont in his speech, and I want you and your wolf with me when we ride north, 300 strong, man, it gets you pumped for what's coming. And I think there's a lot of dread. There's a lot of relief in Season 2's finale, but there's some dread, and Stannis is on his thing, and you move forward, and I think you're still keyed up for the victories, but also I think Daenerys's the lessons learned at Karth and her stepping on out. I think it's a big upbeat, and we'll talk about the Daenerys upbeat. I think that's part of what's present in this episode, again, for better or worse. 5.4 million people watched this on first viewing. I think almost another million on the second showing. That 5.4 million is a 28% increase from the Season 2 finale. The show's growing. The show by this point is a thing. It's a thing for sure. This particular episode was nominated for Outstanding Cinematography at the 65th Annual Emmy Awards. Primetime Emmys there. That would be, of course, Robert McLaughlin. And the last week, that episode got an Emmy for editing, I do believe. Checking my notes from just last week's show, I do believe it did. Oral Noti got nominated for that. There we go. All right. I love looking at kind of reactions then, the legacy now of these episodes. And again, you couldn't escape that this episode just kind of had an anticlimactic feel to it. It's impossible to avoid after the Red Wedding. I think we still were emotionally recovering. That was bigger than Ned Stark's death in a way. I think Ned Stark's death had giant ramifications, not for the show, but just for the pop culture viewing audience. But I think Red Wedding was just, man, we talk about it. Takes an emotional toll. And the Battle of Blackwater Bay, that's one of my favorite episodes. Still one of my favorite battles on the show and in the books too, but on the show. But I think we had a different feel at the end of that one. So season 2 ends in a little different way. This one it's hard to not just think it's anticlimactic because you're still you want you want someone to go get revenge for the Red Wedding. You ready to fight, and now you got kind of we'll talk about the themes later on, but I think there's some themes of winning and losing. And of course, the big question of how you go about doing that and whether that matters in this world. But there's a lot of winning and losing, and the Starks are losing. And that's kind of where we're at. Not a lot of uplifting Stark stuff here, but you want revenge. You're kind of falling prey to that kind of line of thinking there because it's a good line of thinking after what happened at the Red Wedding. So I think it can't help but kind of consider that. Again, when I'm talking about this episode kind of, in terms of finales, falling a little flat for me. And again, watching it this time around, love a lot of the moments in this episode. Love a lot of the moments in the episode, but that's kind of season 3 for me. Love so many of the moments. I think season 3 changes the direction of the story. It focuses the direction of the story. And after this is absolutely closing of a chapter. I kind of look at Game of Thrones, the TV show, in 3 big chapters, season 1, 2, and 3. Then you get a big kind of switch, including cast, including main cast, including a lot of new characters start rolling in. A lot of new villains emerge. 4, 5, and 6 is kind of this chapter. I think that closes, and then we go to the final chapter, 7 and 8. And I think that's what this season and this finale kind of represents to me, kind of this big turning of the page. And that can leave you confused, in a wonderful way. None of this bad, but just where we go now. This is no longer about Rob getting revenge. Justice for Ned and Catelyn Stark. No, they're gone. They're dead, and we're left to deal with it. While this episode does a great job of setting up what's coming, and I do think it does a great job. There's a lot of great scenes. We'll talk about the impact and the story to the story and the impact on us in these scenes. A lot of fun little foreshadowing things. We got Arya and the Hound. We got Davos, Gendry. We got Stannis, Davos, Melisandre. We got Stannis getting the big, the hints, the message, the thought that he's got to go north. We got Sam and Gilly meeting Bran and Mira and Jojen and that kind of connection. The return of Maester Aemon, the Greyjoys, Balon Greyjoy, Yara Greyjoy return here in the show. The reveals, we got kind of the reveal, the connection, if you hadn't been picking up on it yet, on who Ramsay is. Ramsay and Theon, you get that kind of clarity. We got Roose Bolton graduating to, I'm now a bigger villain. I'm not just this kind of dour, annoying guy that's been poking at Rob for 2 seasons. I'm now going to be a player. You got Walder Frey as well. Well, we're going to dive into all that there and all the other things there with him. But in talking about what this episode is known for and the reaction then and Legacy Now, I would be remiss if I didn't discuss the end beat with Dany. And not what it means for the story, because I think it's a great thing for the story, but we'll talk about how I think that story unintentionally, maybe a little intentionally, but unintentionally provides some false hope for Dany kind of picking up the flag of justice in this world and what that might mean for Dany fans and her story going forward. I have some thoughts on that, right or wrong. Like I said, I'm a student of Game of Thrones. I'm a student of Song of Ice and Fire. This isn't an expert speaking. This is just a well-studied student that loves to continue to learn from the show, continue to learn from the story that the books are telling, and can't wait to learn from House of Dragon and any other properties and all the animated shows and all the other wonderful rumors of things to come out there. But I do want to talk about the real world ramifications of this end scene, this end beat. It is the white savior trope at play here. And the show in 2013 did start to receive some criticisms about that and that kind of thing. And that's something that's Game of Thrones is not the only thing that's the only property that's guilty of that, right? And it's the show took some heat, and also it was the first time, not counting some of the basic stuff. And there's always going to be some critics, and always going to be some important questions to arise out of any show and out of any big property. But I think here at the end of season 3, you were really starting to see Twitter change. Twitter had gone from, hey, 2011, let's follow celebrities we know and tweet jokes, to now it became a public meeting place to air grievances, to push for changes, to complain, and to get loud about things. Some of it bad. I think there's a lot of bad things about that, but I think there's also some good things to come out of what social media really quickly turned into around this time, which is amplifying voices that aren't normally heard, and raising important questions, even of things you love. And I think it's hard for me in 2021 to watch this particular episode and not see all of the criticisms again in the final beat, with Daenerys Targaryen, golden hair, blonde woman being lifted high by nothing but a wonderful sea, but a sea of people of color that she's just freed, and she is their savior, their MHYSA, their hero. And it's great for the story of Dany, but it definitely looks dated. And it always was, and it was then. To be clear, again, this isn't new criticism that emerged over the years. In 2013, this was already popping up, but I think at no point am I here to defend the choice made here by Game of Thrones. I'm here to dive into then and to dive into now, and wade those waters and thread those needles as best I can. George R. R. Martin has gone on many shows and many YouTube clips and interviews and provided he's been asked about this directly. And again, his involvement with the show starts to change around this time, I think, and going in season 4. But this, he was front and center for a lot of it, and he's always probably going to be front and center. And I think now he has a little bit more of a, hey, I just sold the show. I was there. Here, you had the idea, you had the feeling that he had a little bit more to do with some of the things, which may or may not be true. But he's provided a reason, saying, hey, that we cast locally at Morocco, and you're going to get Moroccan people, and that's why. And that's an answer he's provided. It's not necessarily, it's not an official answer from HBO or Benioff and Weiss, but that's just what he's gone around, or what he had been saying back at the time. But what's interesting, to me, it's a choice. To me, I do consider it a choice that they made to cast like that, because it's different than the books. It looks different in the books. And I think George is probably, he seems by season 4, he starts getting a little, I've always sensed a little more grumpiness in George, and kind of going, hey, that's not in my books. We'll talk about the season 4 scene in a second here. That caused him, I think, to really, for the first time, I noticed, to do that. But this becomes a choice, because in the books, Yunkai, and also just Slaver's Bay as a whole, is not described with one kind of people being enslaved and oppressed here. It is, in fact, discussed that the slavers of Slaver's Bay are grabbing a lot of folks who look very different. And that's kind of the point. They are just in this horrible position of power, and abusing and grabbing and enslaving anyone they can. That's kind of built in the story. So the casting reasons or not, which again, I think logistically there's probably some truth to that. I'm prepared to say that, but it's still, at the end of the day, becomes a choice, and a choice to take it from book to screen in a different way. So therefore, this scene, it doesn't stand up as well. Again, maybe it never did, but it doesn't stand up for me. I see the problems in it, but I still think I'm able to have that conversation and over here, but also have the conversation about just what it means in story. And I think it's a great moment in the story, and there you go. But it's interesting to look back. It's very interesting to look back and think, for me, and again, sex position, some of maybe the choices around Dany and Khal Drogo on the wedding night. The show had already taken some heat, but here we are in 2013, come this finale. This is the first time I remember there being some bigger questions asked about Game of Thrones and its place in society. And then we get to season 4, and the sex scene at the foot of Joffrey's body with Cersei and Jaime. which has a non-consensual feel to it, at least at the beginning of the scene, fair to say. And how, again, that was slightly different than the books. And that's the first time I remember George R. R. Martin really saying, that's not how I wrote it. And kind of distance himself a little bit. Not that George doesn't have some weird choices he makes too as well. And it's I think it's part of the legacy of the show to look back and say Game of Thrones would become under fire more times later on. And I think part of that is, and I say this in a good way, society does change. And Game of Thrones began, not ended, but began in a little bit of another era. It's kind of conceived, sold, developed, shot again twice with that pilot in the late 2000s into the early 2010s. 2011 it debuts. We're in 2013 for the third season. And it doesn't seem that long ago, right? But that's like if we are in 2000, 2001 right now talking about a show that aired in 1990, 1991 range, right? And we're talking about an episode in 1993 and 2001. Just think of the big changes that happened in that time frame. We're 10 years on from the start of the show. At times, it's a different era. It all still looks and feels the same because time moves that fast. Trust me, the older you get, the faster it goes. But I still think Game of Thrones emerged from another time. When I don't say this to make excuses or anything about it, I'm a stand-up comic, and comedy and entertainment, everything, it changes. It needs to change. If you don't think it doesn't change, just look around. Grab a joke book from the 1920s. Styles change. Society changes, and that's always a good thing. I always say, don't fight change, find your place in change. And I think for a while, Game of Thrones was guilty, and maybe even, some would argue, maybe up until the end, didn't necessarily try to find its place in change. And a lot of it was, well, this is what the story, we're following some of the stuff in the books. And I'm not just talking about individual castings, but just overall stuff. And then there was this time period, it's an HBO show. It's HBO. We can not only can we swear like we want to, we can have sex like we want to, we can put dangerous, edgy things up there. And I'm not like accusing Game of Thrones of being an edgelord show, but it was from that era. I mean, I used to watch Boardwalk Empire. Would get it, just in terms of just basic, just throwing the sex on the screen. That's the Game of Thrones reputation of the sex position. And again, no prude over here. Sex scene has its place, and sex scene can be important to the story. And I think it's used even by season 3. The sex position starts to change in Game of Thrones. But I think it was generally, again, you could probably find individual critics and individual voices who were already saying some of the stuff to Game of Thrones. But I think the sex position specifically, but season 1, it was almost a joke, and it was almost a celebrated. It was almost a wink and a nudge. That starts to fade. But then I think by season 4, you go up to the mutineers and Carl Tanner in that scene, and there's some exposition happening with some sex behind in the background with the mutineers and Craster's the surviving daughters up there. And it's not received well because it's not. I mean, there's nothing about the scene that makes you think it's consensual sex. It wasn't needed, and it was no longer taken as fun Game of Thrones and their sex position. I think people were right to question some of the choices. So I love going back and just kind of seeing where this show lay down on the timeline of society and our viewing habits. And when you look at this white savior trope, you could still do this moment. You could still cast very differently, and you could still have all the power and purpose in this scene. You would just now do it differently, and hopefully you would do it differently. And I think that's okay. And I think that's not to completely release Game of Thrones from any guilt here or take Benioff and Weiss off the hook, especially Benioff. I'm looking at Benioff, but they're doing something. They're trying to do something different, and I think probably for a while we're getting away with something that was it's HBO. Let's just do this. We're just telling this brutal, dark story. That's why these guys are raping these girls in the back, right? I mean, it's just a brutal, dark story, right? It's about Carl Tanner and the expedition. And I think the show started to get questioned more and more. It got questioned up to the very end. I'm not talking about plot choices. I'm not talking about character twists. I'm talking about casting choices, the plot decisions based around rape and all these things that it's like a lot of them were old tropes, failed tropes that never should have been there in the first place. And I think looking at this episode, this jumps out more than anything, that this is the first major criticism that the show does face for me. Again, individual voices along the path, first 2 seasons, I'm sure they were there. but this is the first time, and I think it's a good conversation to have. But the scene is there; it's part of the story. We always like to engage with the story as it's presented with us here. Our theme over on Force Center, provided by the Great Joseph Scrimshaw. So that's my thought. Again, one person's take on it. Not a saying none of this is fact. I'm just looking back through my own lens and trying as best I can to look through society's lens and open any conversations in the comments about that there. Some people are going to have opinions about it. Some people are not going to care. Some people are going to call it a woke agenda coming at Game of Thrones, whatever. But it's there and it stands out to me and it doesn't completely work for me now as much as it did then, because hopefully we all grow and we all start to look at things a little differently. And when you go back and look at it, it's dicey to go back and look at sins in the past, but it's important to still do it and to still see and hopefully move forward from there. That's some general thoughts on that. But again, is it a powerful moment? Yeah, I still think it is. I still think it's there. And it works for me on a lot of the story levels. But also, we'll talk about in a second, I think it also kind of creates some false hope for fans of Dany who are needing a ray of light following the darkness of the Red Wedding. Let's talk about a lot of the other impacts that this episode has on us as the audience, or on the story. I mentioned before, I'm fascinated by this episode kind of being the graduation for Roose Bolton. Yay, we're cheering for Roose. Roose Bolton, without a doubt, present for season 2, season 3. By season 3, we definitely don't like him. You might not have liked him in season 2. And again, I always try to approach these reviews, these look backs, as someone as not show only, but what the show is presenting to us. There's a lot of people probably knew what Roose was going to become, and we don't have the end of his story yet in the books. But season 2, Roose was he was one of the many grumpy guys, maybe having some problems with Robb Stark. I didn't pay too much attention to it. I liked it. He liked him in the sense he was a good actor and maybe had some good points, but I don't know. He seemed extreme, whatever. And then this season, but he builds and builds and builds. And, by the time of the Red Wedding, you're already kind of not trusting this guy. You already kind of don't like him. You've seen what's happened with the Karstarks. You sense Robb is definitely losing his way. They shoot Robb without the armor a lot, leading up to the Red Wedding stuff. We talked about that. Robb is seen and presented as vulnerable, and when it's all lost, and Roose is the man delivering the words from the Lannisters, and along with Walder Frey answering those letters from Tywin, he graduates. Graduation day. He moves up and he's in a position of power in the story, and he's a position for us as viewers. Again, the turning of the page, kind of a new era of the show, seasons 4, 5, and 6. And Roose will be very key to all of that there. So it's impactful from that point of view, impactful to us as viewers. I also like, in terms of just impact on us as the viewing audience, if you had not known anything about the Red Wedding and you're sitting there watching it and your jaw's on the floor and you're frustrated and you're angry and you're crying and you're just horrified by the Red Wedding, maybe in the back of your head, again, I'm saying from a non-book reader point of view, maybe in the back of your head, you're thinking, maybe I didn't really see that. Maybe Catelyn didn't look like it turned out well for Catelyn, but maybe she's all right. And I'm not even talking about Stoneheart stuff. Robb took a lot of arrows. It didn't look good. Maybe he's all right. It's the old, if you don't see him die on screen, maybe they didn't die, right? Again, Red Wedding, it's pretty clear, right? Pretty clear, not good. So I don't love it in terms of its brutal scene to watch, but that episode about the top of the episode with beheaded Grey Wind and Robb's decapitated body and the King of the North chant, the taunting chant, and Arya seeing it, and the Hound, by the way, being disgusted by it, kind of more proof, I should say, that the Hound does have a heart. It's just like any doubts about the Red Wedding, that really impacted us. There's no doubt. That's what you're seeing. And that was, I think, the thing I remember the most, because the episode begins with Roose going up these stairs, and the Red Wedding is still still going. Technically, there's still slaughtering Starks out there. And if you played the Telltale game, House Foresters, you're dealing with some stuff there right now too. And I was still kind of like a week after the Red Wedding, still in disbelief. And seeing Roose go up to the top there and looking at the battle below, and that it's a great shot. I just remember thinking, like someone's gonna come, like another part of Rob's army, maybe the Karstarks, Night's Watch, Blackfish, like someone's gonna come save the day, right? And despite again, I talked a lot about how Game of Thrones does break your heart, but does so to kind of say there's always the hope and there's always the belief that it can always get better and you can move forward. I think there's a little strain of that in a lot of Game of Thrones, as dark as the show could be. And I think I still had that. And then seeing Rob, seeing the body of Rob and the head of the wolf there and the taunting chants, it affected me. It affected me thinking, oh, this really happened. No happy ending coming up here. Another thing I think impacted the story, there's some great stuff with Tywin Lannister and the great Joffrey scene, the small council when they get the word of Rob's death, and we'll talk about any man who has to say he's king is no true king. Great scene, great Tywin stuff here. We've talked on this podcast feed a while ago. Andres Cabrera had come on, of course. He's part of the show here too. We talked about how we kind of love Tywin, and a lot of the reasons I think I'd say I love Tywin, not just Charles Dance is an amazing performer. A lot of it has to do with stuff in this episode and the previous episodes here in season 3. But I think one of the impacts of the story here is Tyrion gets the full scope of his father's hate for him. And that comes in after Tywin sends the king to bed without supper, asks Tyrion to stay around, and they have that conversation about Sansa. You've got to impregnate her. You got to carry on the family legacy, which is so strong, and it's such a strong theme and driving factor for Tywin. But there's a reveal that he wanted to kill Tyrion and take him out to the water, the ocean, just let the waves take him away and drown him. And he didn't, because you're a Lannister, which sounds so noble from Tywin, but really it's horror. It's just absolute horror for Tyrion. And he gets the full scope. And that definitely impacts us as a viewer. But I think, to me, it's one of the final breaking things for Tyrion as we go into season 4 and what's going to happen with the Purple Wedding and the trial of Tyrion, and then the end result here with Tyrion taking out Tywin. All that season 4 stuff we have ahead of us. I look at one of these moments as just, and the way Dinklage is playing it too, and it's a great moment of just, this truly impacts him. It is the full scope of his father's hate, almost if it's like, it's worse than I thought. I know my dad doesn't like me. The whoring, the drinking, all the other things. Yeah, and he's, essentially mentally abused me my entire life. But maybe deep down, there's a part of him that likes me. He keeps me around for some of these meetings. He put me in a position of power as a hand of the king when he was out in season 2. I'm good at playing the game. I think Tyrion has some of that in his brain. And no, this moment probably knocks that out, and sets him up for what's going to come. And when it breaks, it breaks. And I think he knows that going back to some moments like this, that this is what my father thinks of me. He would have killed me, but for my last name. And a lot of father stuff going on here in this episode. A lot about the right name and the wrong names, or the lack of names in this town. We got that chase scene with Varys when he tries to send her away. A lot about that going on there. One final, two little impact moments I want to talk about, but the Greyjoys return, Yara and Balon, and we get Yara gets this kind of it's a great moment with her father, talking about bad fathers, and the right kind of supporting of the family and family name, and the wrong kind of supporting. We see that on display a lot in this episode, even with Gendry and his blood relation to Stannis. There's a lot about that there. Yara, in a way, becomes someone that we root for, right? I don't know what you're feeling about Yara. She doesn't, this is her return to the show. She's obviously more prominent in season 2. I think a lot of people love the Greyjoys. They're not a warm, friendly bunch. And, Theon goes through some things, and it's sometimes hard to watch. I think there's some wonderful performers in these roles. I'm not saying hard to watch in terms of like boring or not effective. I just, great. I don't know a ton of people outside of like myself who are like, really, I'm really interested in the Greyjoy story. But I think at this moment, Yara is a character that we have an affinity for, and her standing up to her father, who has shown that she's the favored offspring from Balon. I think it's a powerful moment. It's almost an inspirational moment. I'm going to take the 50 best warriors, and we know now, we have the hindsight to look back. So no, it doesn't necessarily work. It's a failed mission in a way. But I think it's key to the development of Theon and where he ends up. But I really do like this moment. I think it impacts maybe me more than others, and definitely impacts the story in the sense of Yara now has this purpose. And I think she kind of carries that through with her brother all the way through. So I like that moment. Final one here. Final impact on the story. I've been teasing this one here. A lot of focus on the end of this episode on kind of this renewed feeling of hope. And the hope is focused on Dany and her story. So we've got the Yunkai, the MHYSA moment. And it's interesting. I was going back and reading some old reviews today. And several people kind of looked at like it's also anticlimactic for her story because coming out of Astapor and the acquiring of the Unsullied. Unsullied is the guy who didn't fly the plane in the Hudson Bay to save everybody. The Unsullied and everything, and that is a hero moment that is just iconic. Dracarys, we all love that moment. And this does not hold up to it. It's a different kind of ending, and I don't think you should have done it the other way. I don't think you stretch out Astapor to end, and then season 4 is Yunkai. I think they were right to get us focused on Marine in season 4. I think it's a good thematic end to Dany's journey in season 3. She begins by needing an army. She has growing power. She gets the army. She uses violence and her position of power to do it. She frees the Unsullied, sets sights on Yunkai. We talked about it's one of the big kind of things in season 3 is Dany realizes I have this power, and it is no longer just about conquering and no longer about returning to Westeros for what I think is mine and what I feel is mine. It's now about using who I am, where I've come from, and the power I have now to do good, to liberate. Jorah even says at the end of the episode, because she's doubting whether the people of Yunkai will come out. People grow to love their chains. Jorah says, you liberated them, you didn't conquer them. So a lot of that, I think, fuels Dany forward, but and the people of Yunkai come out and proclaim her MHYSA mother, and she saved the day. And I do think it works at the end of her arc. It confirms that her choice was right for me. That the choice at this point in her life and career, if you will, she hasn't retired yet. I think she could look at it and be like, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do. I wasn't sure. I made this decision at the gates of Yunkai. I'm going to use my power for good. I'm going to liberate. I'm going to break the chains and eventually maybe break that wheel. Not sure if it was worth it. It is worth it. They came out there. I don't think she's doing it for the praise, but I think her going out to the people is accepting the love, accepting their position of power, and that's going to go right into Marine, and we're going to have a lot of problems in Marine, and that's where Dany gets frustrating in a way. Andres Cabrera and I have always talked about that. We get a little frustrated with Dany because we love her so much. In Marine, she goes through a lot, and that's where the story starts to twist. But that's what's coming. Right now, we're in this moment of hope, and we are down and out, man. We've just all experienced the Red Wedding, and now we have this, and this is hope, and hope we can latch on to. Weird connection, but it's you hear in pop culture discussions, you have the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and then a short while later, a couple months later, here come the Beatles, here comes the British invasion, and it was like America latched on to that feeling of joy because collectively, whether they knew it or not, they needed it. I think as an audience, whether we knew it or not, we needed Dany in this moment. Because I remember when Ned Stark is beheaded, I had a couple conversations with friends who were like, "This is Jon Snow's story now. Jon Snow is going to save the day. He's going to make those Lannisters pay for what they did to his father. Then it becomes Rob Stark, and Rob Stark is going to get justice for his father. And Rob even has lines about that. There's a lot about that going on. They're going to get justice. And Catelyn, she's making some big decisions, maybe mistakes, but she's making some decisions for the good of her family, for justice, to save her children, to keep her family together. And suddenly, boom, in a blink of an eye, all that's gone, and our hope is crushed. And I did talk about last week. You can go look at last week's episode, the why of the Red Wedding, the horror of the Red Wedding. I think it is there's a little bit of spin on it for me of trying to push forward. And Game of Thrones reminds you time and time again, bad things happen, but every time you find yourself in a position as a Game of Thrones fan to think bad things are probably going to happen, you choose hope. You choose to believe that maybe this time it won't happen, because that's in us. That's our survival instincts. That's why our hearts keep beating. And I think it's an important thing that Game of Thrones is doing there. But we get our heart broken every time because we believe. Well, here in this moment, I think the show is saying, look at this hope. Dany is over in Essos. She's over at the far side of the world. At points during this season, Joffrey and Tywin have that great scene. People are still, people in Westeros aren't caring as much as Dany about Dany as they were in season 1 and 2. You don't have Robert Baratheon saying we got to go murder her now. You don't have even Tyrion and Varys having that conversation of, that's another battle for another time. Let's focus on this game here. Season 3, she's really off doing her thing and she's growing in power. Now it's legit. I think a lot of people at this point were thinking it's time for her to go. Let's go west. Let's take that throne. And we needed that hope and destroy those Lannisters. And that maybe became our goal. I'm just speculating here, man. Just talking about it. Again, I said, not an expert, student of all this. And I think this episode intentionally ends with this kind of upbeat thing, just like season 2. Dany's free of what's going on at Karth. She's no longer wandering the Red Waste, and now she's got her sights set on going west. Getting a ship, going west. Season 3, I need an army. I get an army. Now I've got some power. Now I'm going to use that power. And then I do believe it was D.B. Weiss that said in the extras on this episode that she needed an army. She got an army, and then as I insert, she got her power. But now she's got her people. And that's kind of what the why of this scene for them, as they put it in there. She's receiving this love. She has in her view and the facts in front of her liberated her people now. First Astapor, now Yunkai, and she's going to go to Meereen, and then the rest of the world, right? And we can't help but be caught up in that joy. That's not the end of the story. And that wasn't the point of the story, that victory after victory after victory, liberation after liberation after liberation, Dany's on the throne, happy ending. They weren't telling that story. They never were telling that story. Jon Snow, hero to be, king to be, secret king to be, wants to be a hero, learns in season 3, being a hero, wanting to be a hero, two different things. His goals start to change. What he's fighting for starts to change. He has the big breakup scene last week with Egret, but now the breakup is really confirmed. And he keeps saying, I got to go home. Talk about that in a second. But what I think it doesn't mean in this moment for Jon's journey is not to be a hero, get the throne, save the day, win the day. Dany's story is not get the throne, win the day. They're telling a different story. Just you can't help but fall for the hope right here. And I don't think that's any of our faults as viewers. None of us are guilty here. We needed this ray of hope. But looking back, this was the replacement for the hope of the Starks getting justice. It's an interesting little moment, and I think we filled the blank in along the way. Again, just my experience. I know people view it differently there. Foreshadowing things with more meaning. Talking about that now. These are the things that, looking back, especially after 8 seasons, you can go back and either they'll tug on your heartstrings a little bit, or maybe they have great meaning later on. Just rolling down the list here. Gendry saved, and you can begin the rowing wherever he is, lost at sea jokes, but Davos saves him, and it is for another day, and it is for an important role. I absolutely, Gendry's got to be there to save the day later on, and so it's a little bit of a butterfly effect here. The big one for me, being a Stannis fan, Stannis gets the word. The whole situation with Davos. Davos now knows how to read, lies, and says Mathos taught me, not his daughter, not Stannis' daughter. And now we know Stannis feels he's got to go north, and he'll get there eventually. And season 4 is about that climb north. getting north and recruiting, and Davos going out and speaking on behalf of Stannis. And I do like it as a Stannis fan, talking about more meaning. There's so many great moments with Davos yelling at Stannis here, even in these final moments here of just like, fine, you kill me, but this isn't you, man. Winning the kingdom by black magic, it isn't you. He tells Stannis that tells Stannis that plainly. Stannis doesn't fully believe it. He even makes a joke about, see, that fire god you hate so much. Now the fire god's saving you. Melisandre says you have a part to play, which ends up being true. I love some of the looks. Talk about things with more meaning. Just some of the looks with Melisandre, Carice Van Houten, and Liam Cunningham as Davos Seaworth. Some of the looks they have here really connect with their ongoing story, their ongoing tension, and their ending as Davos watches her fade away in The Long Night, which is one of my favorite moments in the show. I love that moment. I love the story of Melisandre and the weird, crazy, redheaded, witchy arc that she goes through. And this is this key moment. She starts to switch. Remember, she's maybe crawling for answers, scrambling for answers, and I think she gets one here. And I choose to believe, for the most part, she believes in this, that it's not just any other motive. I think she believes this is the Great War. This has to happen. Remember, the Great Other versus R'hllor is kind of overall, doesn't factor by word into the show, but it's still kind of the overarching ice and fire, light and dark kind of battle. So this does track for her. I think she believes it. One little one here. I loved Varys's quiet pain. Conleth Hill. He and Aidan Gillen as Baelish don't have a ton to do in season 3 as other seasons. Always tragic when we can't get a lot of them because they're so wonderful. I was watching this one day, and during the scene where Joffrey's delivering the news of Rob's death to Tyrion and the small council, there's a shot of Varys in the background, and just the pain and disgust on his head, on his face. Man, it just so reminds me of a lot of season 1 stuff where Varys is just telling everyone who will listen, telling Ned Stark, I do this for the realm because someone has to. And the Targaryen restoration, a lot of that stuff that's got obviously some deeper stuff in the books and just more plot in the books. You're going to always have that more. But I think this being that theme for Varys, everything for the realm, and he has the great conversation with Shay about the wrong name, and will always be second class to everyone here. So he's there. He's amongst the high class to fight for as best he can the realm and those outside those walls. And there's a great moment of him just kind of broken-hearted and angry and disgusted in the back. I do like this, the Bran story, the rat cook, has more meaning now when you think about Arya's later baking skills. It has some thematic relevance, of course, with the code and the killing of the guests and all that kind of stuff. But I think just the rat cook story and the cooking of the king's son into a pie. I wonder if Bran told that story at any point to Arya, and she was like, let me get a pen for that recipe. Going back to Roose Bolton. This one has I always like to look at this section as things with more meaning going forward in the story. But I love Roose Bolton in this moment when Walder Frey's asking and talking to him about how horrible it must have been working for this boy king. And Roose says, perhaps if he's a trifle less arrogant, but he says his line, he ignored my advice at every turn. I love that line from Roose Bolton because in this roll call of a supercut of all the times in season 2 and into season 3, but a lot of season 2 stuff, right from the moment you meet Roose Bolton, he's fighting him. And I love going back to those episodes, and it gives it more meaning going forward. But I love going to this one, especially in 2013, and just thinking, yeah, let me think about Roose. Let me pull up the DVD Blu-ray collection there and watch it. Yeah, Roose fights them there. Roose doesn't agree with them there. Roose rolls his eyes there. It's all there for you. Sometimes as a fan, you're not focusing on it there. I think it's also a little foreshadowing, a little more meaning of the why of the wall. And how the wall is essentially, we believe at the beginning, put there to protect the realms of all men. And the story and the use of the wall has changed over the years. The threat of the White Walkers seems to have been long gone, dead, if it was even there at all. It's all a myth, right? We don't truly believe it now. But here's Samwell Tarly, who has seen it and who knows it's all true. And he's got a wildling woman with him, a free folk woman, Gilly. And I love the scene with Peter Vaughn as Aemon Targaryen, Maester Aemon, returning to the show. It had been a while since we'd seen him, or quite frankly, anyone at the wall. Pip's back for this episode too. And I love Maester Aemon's concerned about the breaking of the vows in terms of, did Sam have sex with Gilly? He hasn't broken that vow yet. But I love that Sam returns it to him with a little bit of fire. Returns to him with the Night's Watch vow, and reminding that it's protector of the realms of men, And it's a great moment. It's a great scene, but I love just applying a lot more meaning to this now, because that becomes a key focal point of the show, of this threat. Even Stannis is like, this army of the dead, Melisandre's telling him, is going to destroy us all. All this War of Five Kings, that ain't anything. And a lot of characters keep that with them going forward. Davos being one, Jon Snow being a major one. Eventually, a lot of other people who believe and go south with this news and this idea that none of this matters. Only thing that matters is up there, this war for the dawn. And I love that here's Sam saying, no, we must protect all realms. And that becomes this big sticking point going forward with Jon Snow. And it's kind of what gets Jon killed, his belief that, nope, we should let everyone through, protect them as ours, as us. We need the free folk, and that's the way to look at it. And that's kind of, we threw up the wall with a little magic sprinkled in to protect us from the White Walkers, not to keep them out. And Jon's learning that. Jon learns that from Egret. Jon learns that all through season 2 and 3. Now here's Sam learning it in his own way, because he's seen what is coming. I love that little moment. Things with more meaning. Shay stays. They try to send her off. I've always debated. And maybe the answer somewhere. I'm talking show only. If Tyrion did send Varys, or I've always taken it as Varys is kind of like, look, I'm kind of rooting for Tyrion. You are a complication. I kind of like you. You're kind of cool. We've hung out. You got to go. And whether or not Tyrion actually knew or not is, to me, the great debate. And again, the answer may exist. Sometimes I'm not concerned about the answer, just that the headcanon, what it means thematically, and how that kind of the Shay starts breaking. She's already been broken. She's already kind of snapped a little bit over this whole Tyrion and Sansa thing. And it's not the fun love of end of season 1, season 2, Shay and Tyrion. It's not hot and sexy and flowers and fireworks right now. It's something different. And I think this is the moment you can point to of, much like with Tyrion learning the full scope of the hate of his father, this is when Shay kind of learns what she's really up against, and it's going to be a battle she unfortunately loses. So this moment has more meaning for me. Two moments. Jaime returns, damaged, but perhaps too damaged for Cersei. It's not the happy reunion I think they both thought. It's a great moment. Such a little tiny moment. Like, it's such a small beat in the show. But two actors at the top of the game just playing it so well, and him just looking down at that hand and looking at that now. And I remember at the end of season 3 kind of taking it again, oddly, I think we Game of Thrones fans find ourselves rooting for Jaime and Cersei at times, which is weird to say. And maybe you weren't rooting for him by season 8. You wanted him to break free. Totally get that. But here, he returns, and it's kind of like, oh, it's a reunion. And I look back at it now, and it's just kind of that mixture of horror, relief, love, and disgust from Cersei, and just confusion. And he has returned to her broken, and where that's going to go. It's interesting to look at that moment now. Final one, in terms of just foreshadowing / things with more meaning, more with things with more meaning than foreshadowing on this particular one. In the Jon and Egret breakup scene, part 2, she is clearly missing with the arrows. It's already been established she does not miss that hunting moment there early in season 3, earlier on. We know now she's missing. She's too emotional. She's too heartbroken, and she just doesn't want to kill him. She wants to, but she doesn't want. When Jon says, I do believe his loyalty to the Night's Watch is it's clear. It's been there. He's learning what it is to truly be a hero, and how that kind of means not wanting to be a hero, and who are you fighting for? That's one of the big things that is changing in Jon, and I think that will change dramatically, of course, by the end of season 4 into season 5. This we know. But when he says, so I get here now when he's saying I'm loyal. I was always loyal, but he says a few times, I have to go home now. I have to go home. And eventually gets there, but it won't be home forever. And that includes Winterfell. And I love looking at the moments where John's like, I got to get back. I can't stay in this cave. You and I can't be together. I'm loyal to the Night's Watch. It was always kind of the part of the plan. But really, it's just perhaps a denial of what the truth is. And he's got a lot of things going through his head. I'm not saying he should have stayed in that cave. I'm just saying it's interesting to watch him do these scenes. I've got to go home, and to know that in truth, that's not going to be his home forever. It has a little bit more emotional resonance for me when I look back at these scenes. Favorite moments and scenes and lines. There's a lot through here. I love the little line of Tyrion. We get Tyrion's own list before Sansa learns the horror of what happened. A little bit more of a lighter scene where she has misheard sheep shifting. Tyrion's about to explain that maybe you heard the word shifting wrong, but Pod interrupts him with the news to go to the small council. So right before all that horror, I love the Tyrion moment where the two guys make fun of him and he has his own list. And he says the line, anyone named Desmond Craighall must be a pervert. Great Tyrion line. The favorite moments and scenes. I love everything about Joffrey insulting Tywin and Tywin's reactions. It's great in the books too. Eventually, if you guys out there are starting the books, maybe finally after all these years, it's from Tyrion's point of view. You get a little bit more insight into Tywin trying his best to suppress a murderous rage here. But I think Charles Dance plays it so well, and Jack Gleason plays it so well. Everyone in the scene plays it so well. The great line from Tywin, any man who must say I am the king is no true king. Sometimes that line is misquoted as is no king at all, but any man who must say I am the king is no true king. Love that there. And then the follow-up with Tyrion after, you've sent the most powerful man of Westeros to bed without dinner. Do you really think a crown gives you power? And we know the answer is no. We especially know that when Tywin's around. And combining this with the earlier moment in season 3 where Joffrey's upset of not getting briefed, and Tywin climbs the steps, and you are being counseled at this very moment. Love that scene. Love combining with here. It's this weird thing where I just love Tywin in a way, and I love to root against him. I didn't want him to win the Battle of Blackwater Bay. I wanted my guy Stannis to win. But man, when he's right sometimes. And in this world, he does things right. But we'll talk a little bit about what the things he's doing wrong that are already essentially costing him. But this is a great moment. This is a memorable moment. And it's one of those Tywin moments. This is why I own the Tywin Funko Pop, I think, is because of this scene. Sam and Bran meeting is an underrated good scene for me. I just like them together. It's kind of fun at this point. You're so the characters are so spread out, and it's almost season 1 vibes for me. Of Sam, it's almost like Sam. They show up there the night forward, and Sam meets Bran, sees the wolf, and is like, "Oh, I remember season 1 of Game of Thrones. Yeah, you're definitely Jon Snow's brother." Like that moment there. There's a great moment from Gilly, Hannah Murray, when Bran's talking about needing to go north, and Jojen's talking about going north, and Gilly just says, "There's nothing north but death." Love that line. Love the delivery. And also it's things with more meaning too. I guess we could add this, but Jojen talking about kings and armies not being able to stop the army of the dead, and Sam saying, and you're gonna, and essentially, yeah, that's true. And essentially, it plays out that way. Yes, we need Arya, we need Theon, we need everyone. We need everyone to go on and play their part and to make the choices that will move them forward to get to the final battle there at Winterfell. But yeah, Bran is the bait. Bran's target, and this moment now has more importance too as well. I do love a line on the reveal of Sam killing the White Walker, Mira saying no one's killed one for thousands of years, and Sam saying, well, suppose someone had to be the first. The Flea Bottom Connection. So I think that's a Kermit the Frog song, right? Flea Bottom Connection. Davos and Gendry having the great conversation. And yes, we can make all the jokes about Gendry goes and rows and rows and rows, but I think it's a great scene for Davos. Davos is kind of a heart and soul and steadfast guy, a moral barometer for a lot of the characters in the show itself. And this works. This works. And what's interesting to me when you relate it to my guy Stannis, I think Stannis loves to deliver the punishments that are deserved. He loves to uphold his duties. He's now got this new duty to go north and perhaps save the day. But I think Davos. I think at one point in time, Stannis would absolutely have rejected this, and Gendry, who did nothing but exist, would not be in chains down below the castle. So I think Davos is right to do this to free him, to get him out of here. It's the right thing, truly the right thing to do. Great conversation. We'll get into some of the themes and lessons of fathers and families and all that kind of stuff. Great Tyrion line. Under it, Tyrion, of course, got some great lines. Many of them made it into books and T-shirts. But Tyrion saying it's not easy being drunk all the time. Everyone would do it if it were easy. Love that line. Great moment, Cersei. We have those connections with Tyrion and Cersei. Those moments where they truly are brother and sister, and there's truly some sort of compassion, empathy, maybe sympathy at best, for each other, but particularly from Tyrion to Cersei, and just discussing her peace, as much peace as she could find as a mother. Even Joffrey, she says, even Joffrey. And in the horrible situation she was in, lest we forget, used as a pawn, sold into a marriage with someone who did not want her, who treated her badly. Their hate kept the realm together, right? All that great season 1 stuff. But it's easy to forget as Cersei makes extreme, at times violent choices with what she's been dealt with. I also think it's always hard to falter. That's why we have that odd kind of rooting for Cersei, even at the end of season 6. We like that wine sip. I think we get some of it. Plus, Lena Headey's just so good at it, right? But I think, unlike some characters who you are perhaps loving to root against, but you love them nonetheless, I don't know. There's parts of me that sometimes wishes, not in the sense of like, what if and the story should have done this, but just as a fan, as watching this as if it's real history unfolding in front of me. There's a lot of times I wish Cersei was able to find some sort of peace, maybe not forgiveness, but some sort of just contentment with where she is, and finding a way to move forward, move away from the trauma, because she deserved it. She deserved it. And there's moments all the way through the show that show that side of her, that starts to go from season 1, the cold witch queen of season 1, particularly the early episodes where you definitely are rooting against her. It does start to slowly unravel, and you see a lot of the pain, you see a lot of the truth, and we're racing towards season 5. We're racing towards the Maggie the Frog vision and how that dominates Cersei, the fear that dominates, along with the pain and the trauma and the abuse. So I do love this moment where, in trying to talk to Tyrion about Sansa, you know what you need to do? You need to give her that child, because as all these horrible things continue to happen around her, and oh, by the way, I've done some horrible things to her, but as they continue to happen, um, that will be her only thing, because that's what I had. It's sad. I also like the moment of Tyrion talking about how long does it go on? Every time we deal with an enemy, 2 more spring up, and Cersei just kind of saying with a resigned sigh of, well, then I guess we'll go on for a long time. Tough, tough, tough. Talk about favorite moments and scenes. I'm sure there's some themes and lessons. I'm sure we can get deep and emotional on it, but I just love the scene in which Arya Stark stabs the Frey soldier who's bragging about trying to take credit, whether he was there or not, of beheading Robb and beheading the wolf and attaching the wolf Grey Wind to Robb's body. Oh yeah, Arya, that's a great scene. I don't need to have any deep lessons in that. I don't need to worry about the ramifications on her soul, or where it will end up, and how this kind of shifts her journey going into season 4, making it a little different, causing the Hound to look at her in a bit of a different light now. She keeps saying she'll kill me. She's probably capable of it. I love that. All that. We can talk about those, but I just love this moment, because this is a little bit of justice. It's a tiny bit of justice. It's the justice we wanted. We still wanted more. We're still going to need the hope of Dany at the end of this episode, but I love that moment. I mentioned it, but Peter Vaughn returned as Maester Aemon, the late Peter Vaughn. I do love his performance as Maester Aemon. It's always so warm. Such a warm presence on the show. I do love the character, but I also love Peter Vaughn in that role. Final line for me. I do like Dany's line when kind of being, told, no, you're a liberator, not a conqueror, from good old Jorah, but people saying people learn to love their chains. That can apply to real life in a lot of ways, just emotional entrapment and the things we go through, and how sometimes that can just become part of our lives. You can have those conversations about it. But I also love what it means for Dany and what she's going to experience in Marine, and how people learn to love their chains is not something you can easily deal with. Marine's going to do a number on Danny for good or bad. And this line has a little bit more meaning too, other than just I really do like it. And I think Amelia's great in these moments. All the stuff I was saying up top, all that aside, I think Amelia Clark is really warm, really wonderful in these moments, and handles it well, and including the joy being held up and people chanting Misa. I think it feels good for her as a character, and it's conveyed well. If you got a question or a tweet, you can always reach out via the hashtag Casterly Talk on Twitter. Follow me at Cut Knapsack. We always get great contributions from folks like Ranger Donald Long, and our pal Eric Monroe. And he is a Stannis guy like me. So this is amazing how something simple like Davos learning to read can cause a chain reaction of events. When he reads Maester Aemon's plea and realizes what's coming, it not only saves his own life because he freed Gendry, but also the realm because it helps to get Team Stannis to the wall. A little line of Stannis telling Davos, speaking of the Red God, you're in his army now. Maybe everyone is without realizing it. Yeah, I do like this stuff. And it's what can happen. We always talk about destiny versus choice, and how I think destiny is just the thing that takes you to the next big choice. I say that all the time because it continues to pop up in these kind of stories. Davos constantly makes a lot of choices that further along his destiny and the destiny of others. And well, Shireen does too. Her kindness, her compassion, her willingness and desire to just help people and be nice to people and teach Davos, my friend Davos, to read in a lot of ways. And we know it's coming with Shireen. So not saying that makes that feel any better, but a lot of ways, I think we all should thank Shireen for doing this and leading to that chain of events. So great comment there from our pal Eric Monroe. Just a couple minutes here, running a little long. I wanted to talk about that stuff up top about themes and lessons from this episode. And in truth, there's some of the themes are not as prevalent as other episodes, and sometimes in the finale episodes are not as. Sometimes the theme is get ready for next season, but there's definitely some themes of winning and losing and the how of winning. I love talking about in the Star Wars world, where I do all the work over at Force Center with Joseph. How we fight is even just is more important than why we're fighting. How well can you maintain yourself in these fights? Game of Thrones, it plays a little differently. Survival is one of the themes of last week's episode. But I think winning, losing, and the how of winning, and this is where Tywin raises some big questions. Let's talk Tywin's morality question. To end the war, protect the family. That's why he did the Red Wedding. And he says, what's that line to Tyrion? You tell me how, 10,000 deaths is better than 12 deaths at dinner, whatever the line is. You all know it. He also says a good man does everything in his power to better his family's position, regardless of his own selfish desires. It all sounds good if you write it down on paper and it's not Tywin saying it to you. It's all a little misguided. It's all about the last name, not the first name. And there's a lot of that in this episode. That comes up a lot. Gendry's first name is probably more interesting to Davos and more important to Davos than his last name, which right now Stannis has a twisted view of that name's value. We have that. We have Tyrion and his father, and Tyrion learning that his father would have killed him if not for his last name, but how that first name does not matter to Tywin. We got Shay, who only has a first name. Varys, who only has a first name. A lot of that runs through all of these episodes. And Theon loses his name. He's now Reek through all of this here. It's interesting, the hows of this, the hows of the wedding. And if you hear Tywin talk on paper, you're like, yeah, he's right. And that's what Andres and I and others have talked about and celebrated, other than just Tywin. Charles Dance is just so great as Tywin. But in this world where survival and protecting the family is important, Catelyn was trying to protect the family. But Tywin does it in this cold, calculated way that, quite frankly, is probably the way to do it if you want to win some battles. And this episode is very much a collection of people who have won and a collection of people who have lost. And not all the people who have won in this episode and are celebrating those victories. That's not going to be the way it is in the end. fact, a lot of the people who are feeling kind of defeated in this episode, arrows in their backs and legs and chests, fathers wanting to kill them. Um, a lot of those characters aren't going to be always losing here. So there's a lot of how of winning, why it's important. Because also the big thing for me with just Tywin, it's not just about some of the theme and the lesson, but the idea that he's talking about this: a good man does everything in his power to better his family's position. I didn't kill you because you're a Lannister. Family, 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 and it is what family. It is family that takes Tywin down, specifically Tyrion, but also I think a little bit of the what happened with Jamie and Cersei. She talks about just the reason she got peace from even Joffrey is just to have somebody, to have someone to love them. And a lot of that, I think what happens with Cersei and Jamie can be at the feet of Tywin, something he faces, does not want to face. And all that kind of conspires to take him down. And it's the bolt of the crossbow that Tyrion will fire, the couple bolts that will actually do it. But it is family what destroys Tywin, which is the one thing he wants to protect. So there's ways to do it. There's a lot of lack of honor always on display in the show, and who survives and who will be forgiven and who wins. Again, the how of winning. So I love again the Rat Cook story that Bran tells in the Night Fort. And the point of the story, I love it. Brand's like, here's the story, but let me start a podcast to tell you the theme of the story. And the theme of the story is he killed a cook, killed the guest beneath his roof. That's why now the Rat King is cursed forever. And that's something, because Bran says that's something the gods can't forget. They cannot forgive it. And then you cut right to Walder Frey. So eventually he'll get his, and he'll get his in the reversal a little bit of the story with a meat pie that he shouldn't have. But again, talking about the lack of honor, and the show is often teaching these characters, our characters that we love, these lessons that honor doesn't necessarily get you to survive and allow you to survive in this story, which is why, again, I think you look at the end of Dany, and you should you want to pick up a little hope with Dany. There's someone with honor, right? It's going to be all right for her. That's not the story. I talked about fathers. There's fathers and family and loyalty displayed by the eyes. In terms of fathers in this episode, we got the good, the bad, and the Greyjoy. Balon, not a good father. Tywin, not a good father. Davos, better father figure that he feels he's a bad father because of what happened with Mathos, but probably nothing he could have done there. And a lot of that at play. Craster, bad father. Hearing that warms Aemon's heart to Gilly. Sam being more of a father to now little Sam than he ever would have had, especially if he was with the White Walkers. It's a lot of family and loyalty themes running through this episode as well, which I think is important following the horrible events of the Red Wedding, where honor and family seem to just be stepped on and crushed and killed and tossed aside. So that's some of the big stuff at play in this episode here. But again, it's a finale. It's wrapping things up. It's setting the pieces. And then you're going to go to an episode 1 of season 4, and more pieces are going to be set. But hey, cannot wait to get to season 4. We're going to get to that in 2 episodes here in Casterly Talk. Oh, Oberyn Martell, Ilaria Sand. We got a bunch of new characters coming in, new situations, a new chapter in the show. Game of Thrones, we've turned the page. Seasons 1, 2, and 3 will be a distant memory of the old times when the cast were a bunch of babies, little tiny kids growing up on our screen in front of us. And now we're into a new era. Bigger budgets. Shows look the same, feel the same, but they're definitely shot a little bigger, a little grander. Miguel Sapochnik hasn't even stepped foot onto a set yet. The next chapter of Game of Thrones is coming, and it begins with season 4, episode 1, and we will be looking at that shortly here. Like I said, in 2 episodes next week, we're going to do a live recording via YouTube of the podcast. So follow, subscribe on the YouTube channels. We grow that. But as always, we're podcast first. So find us wherever podcasts are found. And hey, subscribe to both. It would very much help. Always like to close out with looking at the episode stars of the show. Everyone's always so great. But you know what? I'm going to give a gold star to every performer, including some of the day players. I even like those Frey guys, just the reactions, everything. They're just everyone, just great stuff in this episode. It's season 3. I started season 3 saying, let me look at it. Season 3 is, I love all seasons of Game of Thrones, but sometimes season 3 falls a little flat for me. And it's definitely higher on my list now, because looking back and seeing this in conjunction with season 8, season 3, and talking about turning the chapter, season 3, particularly for Jon and Dany, big lessons learned, and the focus of their characters shifts. And that focus will drive them forward, good and bad, to the very end. And I think a lot of those lessons started to be learned here. A lot of their focus started to be just picked up here, and their purposes were starting to change. So I think that's the legacy of season 3 for me. More on that later. All right, we are on to season 4. Thank you all who have been joining me on this watch along, this rewatch, diving into the big themes, the big lessons of Game of Thrones. Don't forget to follow me at Ken Knapsack. Go to my website, kenknapsack.com, for more information on all the things I do, including upcoming comedy shows. I'll be in Washington, D.C. in December for 4 dates. Check it out, kenknapsack.com. If you like music, I have a music show on Mixcloud called Pop Rockin' Radio, rock and pop rock playlists for all of you there. Until then, we'll see you next time here on Casterly Talk.